This is a Fonzie Studio podcast. Welcome to Tales from the First Nations. I'm Jay Idle, and every week I'll share with you a tale and ancient wisdom of the native tribes of North America. I'll be joined by my cats, Dawa and Fonzie, who will undoubtedly make their presence known at some point, so I might as well just list them as co-hosts. We hope you'll enjoy the tales and wisdom, raise your vibration, and enrich your life with us every week. Welcome, friends. Welcome to the 88th episode of Tales from the First Nations. I'm your host, Jay Idle. We began a series of raven stories a couple of months ago, and I'd like to continue with some more tales of ravens. We've talked a lot about raven significance in the previous two episodes on ravens, so I thought we'd just jump right in with our first of two stories. This is Raven and the Man Who Sits on the Tides. Long ago, the oceans had no tides, and the shores no shallows. Raven knew that there was lots of food in the sea, oysters and clams, mussels and crabs, but how to get to it? He was lazy and preferred getting into mischief. Raven wondered if only there was a way to move the water out of the way so I could gather food from the sea. Raven, he knew nothing about the sea, but he knew the Fogman did. He would find the Fogman and ask him. Raven started asking around. He asked the sandpipers, and like a single bird, the flock darted and swooped this way and that, but Raven could not seem to figure out which way they wanted him to go. Raven asked the gulls. They seemed to be lost souls, endlessly searching themselves. Raven asked the cormorants, perched like lonely sentinels on the offshore rocks, but they didn't know where the Fogman was either. Finally, Raven decided to look far to the north, where the fog comes from. He searched until one day he saw an island bouncing from wave to wave, like a raft free of its moorings. On it was a wrinkled old man with a long, straggly beard. When he saw the Raven coming, he snatched up his hat and pulled it down on his head. Fog began to pour out from under its brim, hiding the Fogman and his island. Raven swooped down and snatched off his hat. "Why do you throw fog in a friend's face? Hey, Raven, give me my hat. I've fog to make," he cried. Raven asked, "Why do you make the fog anyway?" "It's my job. It's what I do. I'm the Fogman." "Well, do you know how the sea can be moved away from the shore?" "I don't know. Please give me my hat. The sun is getting too warm." "Do you know someone I could ask? Go ask the man who sits on the tide." "What is the tide? And why does he sit on it? Where do I find him?" The Fogman pleaded. "Please give me my hat and go to where the sun sleeps." Raven laughed. "I'll just take your hat. It's time we had a sunny day." Leaving the Fogman cursing on the shore, Raven flew towards the setting sun. For many days he pursued the sun and was just about to give up his search when he spotted a solitary rock crag with seabirds swooping around its head and shoulders. Raven was about to ask the birds when the crag yawned. Then it blinked. What looked like a rock was a giant man sitting in the water. 3 times Raven asked him, "Have you seen the man who sits on the tide?" With no answer. But the 4th, the giant roared, "I am the man who sits on the tide." His breath blew Raven back several miles. Avoiding his mouth, Raven shouted in his ear, "Do you know the secret of how to move the sea aside?" "I know many secrets, but I can't remember them." "Well, maybe if you told me one, it would jog your memory." "Go away. I can't remember any." "Well, what is the tide, and why do you sit on it?" "It's my job. It's what I do. I am the man who sits on the tide." Curious, Raven tried to see what he was sitting on. Maybe if you stood on it." "No, I have always sat on the tide. It's what I do." Oh, come on, get up! Go away! You bother me! Raven began circling him. Raven spotted an exposed portion of his backside and got an idea. Flying up high in the sky, he pointed his sharp beak right at it and dropped like a hawk, jabbing the giant real good. With a mighty roar, the giant rose up and startled, howling in pain, jumping around and holding his backside, with his wail drowned out by the sound of 100 waterfalls as the sea poured into a large hole where he sat. The giant danced around in pain. The sea was almost all gone, leaving sand and floundering fish as far as the eye could see. Finally, rubbing the tender spot, the giant sat down. As he did, the sea spurted up and refilled to its former waterline. Raven knew the giant's secret. So that's what the tide is. Now, if we can just teach him some new habits. Raven perched on his shoulder and with his most persuasive trickster voice suggested, "From now on, how about taking a little stretch twice a day, just a short one, so the people can gather food from the sea?" "No, sitting is what I do. I am the man who sits on the tide. I have always done this and always will. It's my job." Come on, everybody needs a break now and then. Just a short stretch, twice a day. Go away, you're upsetting me. I know, it's my job. It's what I do. I am the Raven. I upset things. I upset the darkness when I stole the sun and put it in the sky. I upset the cold when I stole fire from Owl and gave it to the people. And now I will upset you twice a day. The Raven began circling for another jab. The giant roared, "Why, I can squat you like a mosquito. You're no bigger than a minnow to a whale." He began to swing his arms wildly at the circling Raven. Giant waves were formed. As the two struggled, Raven trying to jab the giant trying to crush the Raven. A great storm struck the shores, and they say that this was when Mount Goat first tasted salt and why seashells are found in the mountains. Trying as hard as he could, Raven could not get near a tender spot on the giant. Then Raven remembered Fogman's hat. Raven pulled the hat down on his head. Fog began pouring out thicker and thicker. A fog bank enveloped the giant. He looked around, trying to spot Raven, but he could not see him. All he could see was fog. Then, yow! Raven jabbed him good. For a little while he jumped and danced around, then settled back on his spot. Meanwhile, as the waters receded, Raven was able to gather food from the seashore. The waters were shallow enough to fish, and there were oysters and clams and mussels and crabs. The sandpipers and gulls and cormorants found plenty to eat. Then, as the giant had settled down, the waters returned to their former level. Raven began to visit the giant twice a day at different times to catch him by surprise, upsetting him each time. Sometimes he used Fogman's hat or came in the dark of the moon, and as the tide went out and came in, there was plenty of food to eat. Finally, one day, as Raven was about to put on the Fogman's hat, he saw a surprising sight. All by himself, without Raven's reminder, the giant stood up, stretched, looked around, and after a bit, sat down. Raven was puzzled. He disguised himself as a seabird and flew to the giant's shoulder. "Why did you just stand up and sit down?" "It's my job. It's what I do. As long as I remember, it's what I have done. I am the man who makes the tide go out and come in." And as Raven flew off, he was relieved to find that he would have to upset the giant no longer. He laughed. "I am a Raven. I upset things. It's my job. It's what I do." Sometimes we need a trickster to upset things and create change. In this case, it was very welcome and very good for the people who lived near the sea to enjoy some delicious seafood. The next story also involves the sea, as it takes place after the Great Flood. It was told by the Haida people, but was likely told among other tribes of the Pacific Northwest as well. This is Raven Finds the First Men. There are different stories about how Raven created the world and the first men. Some of them have Raven forming the first people out of clay, but I like this story. After the Great Flood had at long last receded, Raven had gorged himself on the delicacies left by the receding water. So for once, perhaps the first time in his life, he wasn't hungry. But his other appetites, his curiosity, and the unquenchable itch to meddle and provoke things, to play tricks on the world and its creatures, these remained unsatisfied. Raven gazed up and down the beach. It was pretty, but lifeless. There was no one about to upset or play tricks on. Raven sighed. He crossed his wings behind him and strutted up and down the sand, his shiny head cocked, his sharp eyes and ears alert for any unusual sight or sound. The mountains and sea, the sky now ablaze with the sun by day and the moon and stars he had placed there by night. It was all pretty, but lifeless. Finally, Raven cried out to the empty sky with a loud, exasperated cry. And before the echoes of his cry faded from the shore, he heard a muffled squeak. He looked up and down the beach for its source and saw nothing. He strutted back and forth once, twice, 3 times, and still saw nothing. Then he spied a flash of white in the sand. There, half buried in the sand, was a giant clamshell. As his shadow fell upon it, he heard another muffled squeak. Peering down into the opening between the halves of the shell, he saw it was full of tiny creatures cowering in fear at his shadow. Raven was delighted. Here was a break in the monotony of the day. But how was he to get the creatures to come out of their shell and play with him? Nothing would happen as long as they stayed inside that giant clamshell. They were not going to come out as long as they were so afraid of him. So Raven leaned over his head, close to the shell, and with all the cunning and skill of that smooth trickster's tongue. It had so often gotten him in trouble, into so many misadventures, during his troubled and troublesome existence. Well, this time, he coaxed and cajoled and coerced the little creatures to come out and play in his wonderful, shiny new world. As you know, the Raven has 2 voices, one harsh and strident, and the other, which he used now, a seductive, bell-like croon, which seems to come from the depth of the sea, or out of the cave where winds are born. It's an irresistible sound, one of the loveliest in the world. It wasn't long before one, and then another, of the little shell dwellers emerged from the shell. Some scurried back when they saw the Raven, but eventually curiosity overcame their caution, and all of them had crept or scrambled out. Very strange creatures they were. 2-legged like Raven, but otherwise very different. They had no feathers, no fur, they had no great beak, their skin was pale, and they were naked except for the dark hair upon round, flat-featured heads. Instead of strong wings like Raven, they had thick little arms that waved and fluttered constantly. They were the first humans. For a long time, Raven amused himself with these new playthings, laughing as they explored with wonder a much expanded world. Sometimes they helped each other, sometimes they fought over something that they had found. Raven even taught some of them some tricks, but soon he became tired of their ceaseless activity. For one thing, they were so helpless out in the world, they needed shelter from the sun and the rain. They were so fearful and seemed so small, and there were no girls among them, only boys. Raven was about to shove these tired, demanding and annoying creatures back into their shell and forget them. Then, as so often happens with Raven, he had an idea for some fun. Raven began to search for the girls. For it is the way of things in the world that there are both males and females of every creature. Somewhere there must be girls. Raven searched and searched, under logs and behind rocks. He looked everywhere, but he could not find the hiding place of the first girls. But as he searched, the tide was going out, and as it reached the lowest, the Raven spotted some giant chitons clinging to the rock. These giant shellfish had but one shell, fastened tightly to the rocks, with huge soft lips around the edges. Raven pried one loose with his beak, and there, inside, was a girl. He pried off another, and another, and another. In each was a girl. They were very similar to the creatures he had found on the clamshell, but more like the chiton, softer and rounder, in contrast to the hard shell and strong muscles of the clam. And these were just as frightened of the Raven. He gathered them onto his back with difficulty and brought them to the boys he had found in the clamshell. Raven was expecting the boy creatures to be very happy he had found some girl creatures, but to his surprise, they were frightened of them, and some even ran back into the giant clamshell to hide. The girl creatures were just as shy and huddled together, watching the males with fearful and curious eyes. Both the boy and the girl creature seemed very modest and sought to cover their bodies with strips of kelp and woven seaweed from the shore. The boy creatures were astonished and embarrassed and confused by feelings they'd never had before. They didn't know how to behave, but some of them overcame their fear and began to do things to attract the attention of the girl creatures. Some began to show off the tricks that they had been taught, leaping and running and wrestling with other boy creatures. Some of the girl creatures overcame their shyness, first with quick glances, then finally allowing the boy creatures to approach them, and even leaving the safety of their huddled group of girl creatures. Gradually, the two groups began to mingle into one, and just as gradually, the boy creatures and girl creatures overcame all their fears and paired off, walking hand in hand, their eyes absorbed in each other totally. Raven watched all of this with increasing interest and surprise. Among all the creatures of the world, there were few whose male and females were so very different. The males proud, agile, and strong. The females gentle, soft, and tender. Sometimes the males would be too rough in their play with the females, and there would be tears. But those same tears seemed to have an emotional power over the males, bringing out of them protective instincts. The strengths of each balanced the weakness of each. And since that day, Raven has never been bored. In fact, at times, he's almost regretted bringing the first men and women together. From the strong muscles of the clam and the soft lips of the chiton, from the pairing of the first people came many families. Children were born, some strong and male, some soft and female. Many generations have been born, have grown and flourished, have built and created, or fought and destroyed. Many have blamed the Raven for playing terrible jokes on humanity, for often men and women just barely get along. But somehow, from this strange combination of reason and intuition, of muscle and emotion, arose that which was needed for the race to survive the storms of life on the shores. Raven himself felt strange protective urges for these first people. Though a glutton and trickster by nature, he would again and again provide for these creatures he found in the clamshell. In time, he would bring them the sun, moon, and stars, fire, salmon, and cedar, teach them the secrets of hunting and the world. Raven would watch these weak creatures become both strong and loving, courageous and compassionate, able to fend for themselves and survive. And their children were no timid shell dwellers, but they continued to be children of the wild coast, of the stormy shores between the land and the sea. They challenged the strength of the stormy North Pacific, wresting their livelihoods from the sea even as they made their homes on its shore. How kind of Raven to continue to watch over us after putting us together and allowing us to flourish. It's in balance of the two sexes that allow us to be strong and united in facing whatever challenges come across our path. I'll end again with the prayer credited to Koyukan. Raven that is, Raven that was, Raven that will always be. Make prayers to the Raven. Raven, bring us luck. It's with respect and gratitude that I offer you my blessings, and thank you for sharing your journey with me and sharing your time with me on the podcast. I wish you well and look forward to sharing another story with you next week. Go in peace, return in peace, and may you be well. Both of our stories today came from Elderberry's Raven Tales at elderberry.net. That's ELDRBARRY.net. Our first story, Raven and the Man That Sits on the Tides, can be found in multiple collections of Tlingit, Salish, and Haida stories. It can be found in Raven Tales, Sketco the Raven by Robert Eyre, and Raven the Trickster by Gail Robinson. A similar tale is found in the more traditional Raven cycle, Raven and the Tide Women, in Raven by Dale d'Armand. The Fog Hat appears in that same collection in the possession of Petrel, Raven, and the Fog Hat. The second story, Raven Finds the First Men, can be found in Bill Reed's and Robert Bringhurst's Raven Steals the Light. For more great stories and legends, join me next week for another story here on Tales from the First Nations. I'm Jay Idle, and I'll talk to you next time. If you enjoy the podcast, please like and review us in your podcast service so we might grow further, and feel free to recommend us to your friends and family as well. Music is provided by my dear friend Scott Brocklesby, who created this beautiful song you're listening to, and our podcast Image of the Moon was provided by Mark Lawton. We will see you next time. All right, that's it. How'd we do, Dawa?
Awesome.
Phones? Excellent. Then I'll share it.